Well, all right. How about tonight we bring you three short tales from Grimm's fairy tales. Maybe not short, but certainly shorter than the others. So let me set the mood here. Oh, that's right. Let's dive in, shall we? Two. The Giant and the Tailor. Not to be confused with the gallant tailor. A certain tailor who was great at boasting but poor at doing took into his head to go abroad for a while and took about the world. As soon as he could manage it, he left his workshop and wandered on his way over hill and dale, sometimes hither, sometimes thither, but ever on and on. Once, when he was out, he perceived in the blue distance a steep hill, and behind it a tower reaching to the clouds, which rose up out of a wild, dark forest. "Thunder and lightning!" cried the tailor. "What is that?" And as he was strongly goaded by curiosity, he went boldly towards it. But what made the tailor open his eyes and mouth when he came near it was to see that the tower had legs, and leapt in one bound over the steep hill, and was now standing as an all-powerful giant before him. "What do you want here, you little fly's leg?" cried the giant, with a voice as if it were thundering on every side. The tailor whimpered, "I want to just look about and see if I can earn a bit of bread for myself in this forest." "If that is what you are after," said the giant, "you may have a place with me." "If it must be, why not? What wages shall I receive?" "You shall hear what wages you shall have. Every year 365 days, and when it is leap year, one more into the bargain. Does that suit you?" "All right," replied the tailor, and thought, in his own mind, "A man must cut his coat according to his cloth. I will try to get away as fast as I can." On this the giant said to him, "Go, little ragamuffin, fetch me a jug of water." "Had I not better bring the well itself at once, in the spring too?" asked the boaster, and went with the pitcher to the water. "What? The well in the spring too?" growled the giant in his beard, for he was rather clownish and stupid, and began to be afraid. "That knave is not a fool, he is a wizard in his body. Be on your guard, old Hans. This is no self-serving man for you." When the tailor had brought the water, the giant bade him go into the forest and cut a couple blocks of wood and bring them back. Why not the whole forest at once, with one stroke? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there, brought rough and smooth? asked the little tailor, and went to cut the wood. "What? The whole forest, young and old, with all that is there, both rough and smooth? And the well in its spring too?" growled the credulous giant in his beard. And what was more terrified, and was still more terrified rather, the knave can do much more than bake apples, and has a wizard in his body. Be on your guard, old Hans. This is no self-serving man for you. When the tailor had brought the wood, the giant commanded him to shoot 2 or 3 wild boars for supper. "Why not rather 1,000 at one shot, and bring them all here?" inquired the ostentatious tailor. "What?" cried the timid giant in great terror. "Let well alone tonight, and lay down to rest." The giant was so terribly alarmed that he could not close an eye all night, long for thinking what would be the best way to get rid of this accursed sorcerer of a servant. Time brings counsel. Next morning the giant and the tailor went into a marsh, round which stood a number of willow trees. Then said the giant, "Hark you, tailor, sit yourself on one of these willow branches. I long of all things to see if you are big enough to bend it down." All at once the tailor was sitting on it, holding his breath, and making himself so heavy that the bough bent down. When, however, he was compelled to draw a breath, it hurried him, for unfortunately he had not put his goose in his pocket. So high into the air that he was never seen again, and this to the great delight of the giant. If the tailor has not fallen down again, he must still be hovering about in the air. And that was the giant and the tailor. Let's move on to another short one, shall we? How about the golden key? In the winter time, when deep snow lay on the ground, a poor boy was forced to go out on a sledge to fetch wood. When he had gathered it together and packed it, he wished, as he was so frozen with cold, not to go home at once, but to light a fire and warm himself a little. So he scraped away the snow, and as he was thus clearing the ground, he found a tiny gold key. Hereupon he thought that where the key was, the lock must also be, and dug in the ground and found an iron chest. If the key does but fit it, thought he, no doubt there are precious things in that little box. He searched, but no keyhole was there. At last he discovered one, but so small that it was hardly visible. He tried it, and the key fitted exactly. Then he turned it once round, and now we must wait until he has quite unlocked it and opened the lid, and then we shall learn what wondrous things were lying in that box. That was it, the golden key. Let's move on to sharing joy and sorrow. There was once a tailor who was a quarrelsome fellow, and his wife, who was good, industrious, and pious, never could please him. Whatever she did, he was not satisfied, but grumbled and scolded and knocked her about and beat her. As the authorities at last heard of it, they had him summoned, put in prison, in order to make him better. He was kept for a while on bread and water, and then set free again. He was forced, however, to promise not to beat his wife any more, but to live with her in peace, and share joy and sorrow with her, as married people ought to do. All went on well for a time, but then he fell into his old ways, and was surly and quarrelsome. And because he dared not beat her, he would seize her by the hair and tear it out. The woman escaped from him and sprang out into the yard, but he ran after her with his yard measure and scissors, and chased her about, and threw the yard measure and scissors at her, and whatever else came in his way. When he hit her, he laughed, and when he missed her, he stormed and swore. This went on so long that the neighbors came to the wife's assistance. The tailor was again summoned before the magistrates and reminded of his promise. "Dear gentlemen," said he, "I have kept my word. I have not beat her, but have shared joy and sorrow with her." "How can that be," said the judge, "when she continually brings such heavy complaints against you?" "I have not beaten her, but just because she looked so strange, I wanted to comb her hair with my hand. She, however, got away from me and left me quite spitefully. Then I hurried after her, and in order to bring her back to her duty, I threw at her, as a well-meant abomination, whatever came readily to hand. I have shared joy and sorrow with her also, for whenever I hit her, I was full of joy, and she of sorrow. And if I missed her, then she was joyful, and I sorry." The judges were not satisfied with this answer, but gave him the reward he deserved. And that has been Sharing Joy and Sorrow. And let's move on to our final Grimm's fairy tale for this evening, The Nail. A merchant had done good business at the fair, and he had sold his wares and lined his money bags with gold and silver. Then he wanted to travel homewards, and be in his own house before nightfall. So he packed his trunk with the money on his horse and rode away. At noon he rested in a town, and when he wanted to go further, the stable boy brought out his horse and said, "A nail is wanting, sir, in the shoe of its left hind foot." "Let it be wanting," answered the merchant. "The shoe will certainly stay on for 6 miles. I have still to go. I am in a hurry." In the afternoon, when he once more alighted and had his horse fed, the stable boy went into the room and said to him, "Sir, a shoe is missing from your horse's left hind foot. Shall I take him to the blacksmith?" "Let it be wanting," answered the man. "The horse can very well hold out for a couple of miles which remain. I am in haste." He rode forth, but before long the horse began to limp. It had not limped long before it began to stumble, and it had not stumbled long before it fell down and broke its leg. The merchant was forced to leave the horse where it was, and unbuckle the trunk, take it on his back, and go home on foot. And there he did not arrive until quite late at night. "And that unlucky nail," said he to himself, "has caused all this disaster. Make haste slowly." And that has been the nail in the short stories in between our longer stories from Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. There she is. Join us next time for Tom Thumb. And that one is a longer one. And then we'll proceed on to Tom Thumb's travels. Thanks for joining. Good night now.